Good morning and welcome to What's in Your Wardrobe. Today I've got something a little bit more serious. I've got Ben from Textile Recyclers Australia and we're here to talk about what happens after things come out of your wardrobe. Where do they go, Ben?
Well, unfortunately, I'd say today most of the clothing and textiles, not just in Australia but globally, ends up in landfill.
Why is that?
There's no easy path for recycling. So there's no streams. I think historically, clothing's been going to the charities sector.
Yeah.
Charity sector has done good work with the clothing in terms of monetizing it and using those funds for the work that the charities do, which is excellent stuff. But I think what's happened over the last 50 years, the amount of clothing onto the market is surpassing the capacity of not just the charities but society generally as to what to do when it's finished its use by.
Yeah.
So it's a numbers game. There's just too much.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. So in your wardrobes is the real sort of first part of where the clothing gets stored, I would say. Here in Australia, we had this thing, as you know, red cycle. The clothing side of things and fashion, we've had red cycle for years and years.
Just explain what Red Cycle is.
So Red Cycle was a great initiative and a great scheme and an idea to capture soft plastics.
Okay.
And that was set up with the support of the big supermarkets, where consumers can drop their soft plastic bags, etc.
Oh yeah.
into the supermarkets. It will be captured and then put into a recycle system where it'll be used. Unfortunately, it collapsed. It collapsed because I think there wasn't enough foresight on the volumes. So there was just too much coming through. Red Cycle and their recycling partners did not have the capacity to swallow up the volumes which were going on. So unfortunately, they had bigger and bigger warehouses, and the scheme just collapsed because it was just overwhelming. It was just too much.
So it's fully not happening at all now?
In Red Cycle, I believe, or in that space, I do believe the government has reached out to the supermarkets and they are starting to rebuild some sort of system for soft plastics. But soft plastics are akin to clothing, there's just so much of it, and that's the problem. So with clothing, we have no sort of system even. Moving forward, there's a Seamless project, which is an industry-led project, which is excellent, which I commend, and hopefully that'll get legs and they'll be able to start to capture some of the unwanted clothing. But right now, where is all the unwanted clothing? As you visit commonly, Sharon, it's in people's wardrobes.
Absolutely.
So that's the first step. I think a lot is sitting at the warehouses of the big charities, and they've got a real issue with what to do with it, because to dispose of it, it's a great cost to them to dispose. So I think there's got to be a bit of a rethinking on how things sort of work. Textile Recyclers Australia, it's our 10th year this year. So
yeah, right.
So it's a big step for us. So we've built a foundation. Our mission remains, as from day one, is to keep as much clothing and textiles out of landfill. It's not a simple thing to do because there's a cost. As you know, there's no free lunches for anything. So there's a cost to handle textiles. And that's part of the sort of transition we're going through now. And there's a lot more voice about sustainability, particularly in clothing and fashion today in the zeitgeist. So that's great. And hopefully that will be turned into more implementation.
So where do you get where does it mostly come from? Like the individual or companies or?
Well, from our business, we do with local government. So we get stuff from local councils, we do from corporate businesses, we do from fashion companies, and we do direct to consumer. So we pretty well cover everybody. But again, it's the cost factor. Some councils will have budget to look after it, some won't. So they're the harsh realities. To meeting that gap, that cost of handling the product, keeping it at a landfill, the most economically sustainable way.
Yeah. And so when it's coming from companies, are they getting rid of the end of runs or what, or something's wrong with the garment, I guess, is another.
It's a bit of both. I'd recommend to companies, to council, to everybody, the recyclers we're the last port of call.
Yeah.
So we're like the funeral parlour, unfortunately. Stay away as long as possible.
Yeah.
But
Keep it in
eventually,
circulation.
that piece of apparel will no longer be fit for purpose. And the charities are very fussy with what they get today, and rightly so. The big fashion retailers, they will discount till the price is discounted to a figure that it's not economical even to handle. So then they may give it to a charity to deal with. Then the problem is if the charity can't move it, then what happens to it? So the charity cycle and that pathway is all about reselling it and reusing a garment, which is great. You need to get as much longevity. That's why I'm saying the recyclers should be the very last.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, what are they going to do with grandpa's old pajamas?
Yeah, and I guess the other thing is that some of these companies don't want their end of runs in a charity place because then it devalues their whole brand.
That's very much company by company. Some do that, and some, they're more conscious about that. I mean, I've heard of horror stories where some brands will go for what they call deep landfill because they can't command the price and they don't want to devalue the brand by a lower price.
Yeah.
So they will.
What do they do with deep landfill?
It goes deeper into the ground, so there's no chance of ever being resurrected. Or there was the British brand? They were found burning their product.
Oh yes, we probably shouldn't be advertising that.
Yeah, so that was unfortunate.
I did see that.
It did take a bit of eyes-on publicity to say, hey, this is the wrong thing, and indeed that's great that people like yourself are doing a bit of like almost investigative journalism because that's important to say, hey, there are better ways.
Absolutely. And so what happens to it after it comes here? What do you guys do with it?
If the garments are, so there's pre-consumer textile and post-consumer textile. So pre-consumer or clothing. So pre-consumer might be some uniforms, for example, and the company's had a brand change. So they don't want someone walking around with the old brand. So they'll have all the branded goods decommissioned. So decommissioning means basically it will be destroyed. We do that here. We do that in our warehouse here in Melbourne, and we do the same in Sydney. And we make those garments unwearable. After that, if it's clean, pre-consumer material that's never been worn, we keep it here in Australia. We shred it down a lot finer, so it turns into a filler. So it's a filler for furnishings, for beddings, for this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's a really good outcome because it's still staying in that textile ecosystem. If it's post-consumer, we ship it to our partners in India. And over there, they turn it back into a yarn if the fibre is good enough. So it's not a super fine yarn. So it's not going to be 200 count, sateen, cotton sort of weave product, but can be used for, socks, which are sort of more mountain sock sort of thing, or it can be used for carpet loops. So again, it still stays in the textile system. That's if the fibre is strong enough to turn into a yarn for that sort of purpose.
And so with that, do you obviously check what the composition is here before you work out what's happening with it?
We do. If there's something we're alerted to that is not sort of within a common fibre range, we'll probably need to flag it. But if it's, we can all blended sort of fabrics. Our guy in India, our partner, which we've been with many years now, he's does do all sorts of, it's a mechanical recycling. So the first step when it gets to India, and we've got quite a good control system, so every bale of stuff is marked and numbered, so we know what's in the bales. When it gets to India, the first part of the story there is they will start to separate by colour.
Yeah.
Because to dye virgin material again, not only are we mitigating using virgin material, we're now mitigating using new dye stuffs. And dye stuff is probably the most pollutive process in creating creating
Yeah,
textiles.
right.
So that's a great point, actually. So then there's a certain colour range that is built up. It can be blended product. All the trims are removed after colour, then it's trims. So then buttons will be either resold within the Indian domestic market.
Yeah.
If it's not resold, or if they're broken and things like that, it will go into a plastics company for use as a plastic material input.
Okay.
Same with metal zippers and metal eyelets and things like that. It'll go to the metal guys and they'll reuse it as a raw material.
Oh,
there is
fantastic.
no waste.
Yeah.
So that's what we do in India. Our partner, as I said, which we're working for many years, is ISO accredited, CEDEX accredited. CEDEX is more of a clothing system for checking the factories for human rights and things like that. So they're approved that way. A global recycling standard accredited as well.
Yeah.
And we welcome visits. So you're welcome to visit our partners in India.
To India.
There you go, and see what we do. So, and that's how we work at TRA. It's with transparency, authenticity, and yeah, what you see is what you get. So, but there's a cost to transport it to India. There's a cost for what we're doing to handle. And sometimes if it's it might be prohibitive for a company because they get cost shock. That's where things like seamless is so important, to integrate an afterlife stewardship, so they can start to cost in their afterlife stewardship of products to help mitigate all this landfill. So that's, and we advocate to all our clients, cost in your afterlife stewardship of your product, and then you'll have no cost shock in 2 or 3 years later. I think there's other things changing in the market. ASIC is now asking the larger companies to do reporting akin to the slavery, to the slavery reporting that the large companies have to do now. So they'll have to show what sort of impact they're having, and this is all part of it. So I think more transparency is the only way to go, and then you can see, cards are all up, and you say, well, it's not a matter of pointing fingers at people. It's a matter of saying, well, there's an issue here. Let's see how we can resolve it.
Yeah, that's right. And I did read somewhere where there's like 400 different ways that a garment can actually be recycled or kept in the cycling system. Like through, I don't know, someone said that you could use them as even in roads and things like that.
Well, we're doing a lot of R&D for a small business. We're working with the University of New South Wales.
Okay.
We're working with Deakin.
Yep.
We work with RMIT. So, and we do a bit of in-house R&D, which I can show you what we're doing there, to find pathways. Because there's not going to be one magic pathway to solve this astronomical number of clothing, which is only growing.
Yeah.
It's not getting smaller. It's only growing. So we need many solutions to this problem. So there is more of that reselling, whether it's through charitable systems or new reselling platforms which are coming onto the market. So that's excellent. That keeps your utility going. But the population in Australia is definitely growing. So there's more and more stuff coming in, but definitely buying for longevity is better. Designing for longevity is better.
Oh, absolutely. But I think with that too is all of that actually comes at a cost. So the consumer actually, instead of buying $5 $20 items, put all that together and buy one beautiful item that's going to last for ages, and you're going to look amazing and feel amazing in it. There's nothing better.
Yeah. And I think it's also, I think what will happen also as part of, I'm not sure what I would say would come under Seamless's advocacy for better labelling. So explaining to the consumer the impact that this garment has had in its creation and may have in its eventual demise. So
including the fabric, the actual composition of the fabric, and how long that takes to decompose.
well, there's that, but before it gets to that stage, I mean, if it comes to us, it's not going to decompose quite yet. We'll give it that, we'll turn it into a raw material for other products. But in the transition, you'll be washing your garment how many times? Then you'll have the shedding of your microfibers.
That's right.
Through
That's
the
a
wash.
big.
So that's another horrific story, which globally we're still way behind. There's a lot of research going on, a lot of science going on. There's a bit of advocacy in some jurisdictions to have better filtration on our washing machines.
Yes, I did read that too.
Yeah, so that's something that we need to escalate here in Australia, but it's probably for a whole
Another podcast.
that one. But that is certainly, well, I think the last figure was about over 60% of microfibers can be attributed to clothing, domestic wash cycles.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that.
Yeah. So it's, so there's a lot of work to be done.